Very good evening, and it is my delight to welcome you to another session of Caregiving in Print and Pictures. For those of you who have walked with us this path, you would know why we do these series. Caregiving in Print and Pictures is our endeavor to explore ideas around caregiving, caregivers, their journeys, and how these stories are told to us through writing, in pictures, films, stories, and how they inform the ideas that we form, and sometimes the way that we respond to our circumstances because of these stories that have sometimes been told perhaps generations ago. It is important that as we change the world, we examine what are these ideas and what is it that we have been told so that we can create a different world with new ideas, with new ways of looking at things. Maybe there was a concept of caregiving that was relevant many decades ago, and maybe it is time for us to examine what it must mean for men and women of the modern times. So, welcome to another session of Caregiving in Print and Pictures, inspiring and sustaining the caregiving journey. It is our 11th session, and it is my delight to welcome today's author, Suzanne White, and I will be talking to you about Caregiver Sathi first and introducing the author in a bit. Caregiver Sathi is our endeavor to empower family caregivers by creating an ecosystem of well being and healing for the primary caregivers who are navigating terminal illness, chronic, or any other life limiting conditions. Our aspiration and dream is to support them through their caregiving journeys and hopefully beyond. How do we do this? We do this through awareness programs, our helpline, healing circles, or support groups, through our research, curated and original articles, and our communication over social media. There are many resources that we have built so far, which is our tech-enabled support through our app and website, our education through online and offline media, community sensitization through caregiver diaries, that's our podcast, daily mantras, and various other forms of communication. Our flagship program is caregiver coaching and family counseling. And finally, a thriving volunteer base throughout the world actually now, and training them on emotional first aid so that we can support family caregivers. There are many ways in which you can get involved, be a part of our conversations with gentle warriors, which is conversations of caregivers and their caregiving journeys. You can spread the word about us. You can volunteer with us. There are many, many ways in which you can volunteer your skill and time. You can partner with us through our partner program. And of course, you can join us as an intern or fellow. Whether or not you're a caregiver today, you can join the support groups or healing circles. You can help us raise funds. You can collaborate with us. If you are an educational institution or you're another organization, you can participate in our research. And most importantly, you can be a sathi or a companion to another caregiver. With that, it is my delight to introduce you to the speaker, Susanne White, who has written this book, The Caregiver's Little Guide to Survival. She's the founder of Caregiver Warrior. We will talk to her what that is. She's an author, blogger, speaker, and a caregiver advocate. She was blessed with the opportunity to care for her parents and ventured out on a caregiving journey that would change her life. She blogs about her journey on her website, caregiverwarrior.com. and shares her experience, strength, and hope with others so that they too may survive caregiving with grace and empowerment. Those are absolutely beautiful words. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you. So lovely to be here with you.
Is there something that you would like to tell us in addition to what was your introduction or introduce your caregiving journey?
Yes, it's so wonderful to be here with you, and I just love what you're doing. I love that the caregiving band-aid. I love the fact that you realize caregivers really need to find strength and hope with each other, share their stories, and communicate. So it's really nice for me to be here today and tell you how my life and my caregiving journey started and why I am trying to reach out and save a caregiver at a time. Would you like me to tell you a little bit about my caregiving journey?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. So, I would like to just give a little bit of background with my parents. My dad was a World War II hero. He was a bombardier fighter pilot. So he was a very kind but stoic type of fellow. And my mom was a very go-getter, kind of controlling, feisty personality. And what we didn't realize was they were had been working together for a team for many years. But what we didn't realize is they were working together as a team to hide my mom's early stages of dementia. So we knew they were getting older, and we knew that, you know, down the road they might need some help from us. But we were completely unprepared for the fact that during a family holiday, my father was flying to be with the family, and my mom and dad were flying together. And my dad got so sick on the airplane that they had to take him off in a wheelchair. And the irony is that he was shot down in World War II, and they had to take him off the plane, even though he landed it as a pilot. And here he was, so much later in life, being taken off a plane because he was so sick and he had to be in a wheelchair. We were shocked. Um, so what happened was that we discovered he had caregiver burnout. He was a caregiver
Mm.
warrior, and he had walking pneumonia. So as he was recuperating, we realized that my mom was really lost without him because he had been sleeping so much when he was recuperating with the family, and she was forgetful. And it hit me. It hit me that they were doing everything they could to sort of hide from us that they needed help, but that they needed help. And I asked my father one day when he was sitting there, and I said, "Daddy, do you want me to kind of help out?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "Yes," so fast. I was like, "Okay." And that was it. I was off and running on my caregiving journey. And being a type A control freak person, I rushed in. I wanted to do it perfectly, and I wanted to do it quickly, and I wanted to fix everything. And I soon learned that there were things I had to learn about myself, my parents, and what it meant to be a caregiver. Um, so I started to really look at myself and what it meant to be a caregiver, and pledged that I would let others know what I've learned. So there began my journey.
I think there's so many of us who have our caregiving stories and journeys, but not everybody makes that pledge, right?
Mm. Yes, and
And
I agree. I think we would all make the pledge to help each other out, but I think caregiving is so intense and so challenging that we're overwhelmed.
that's right. And would it be fair to assume that this pledge was the genesis of your writing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I began to realize that I needed to take little breaks and take mini vacations, and I always wanted to ride horses all my life. and there was a barn right near my parents' house. So I decided I was going to try to carve out an hour on a Sunday for me to go riding. And it turned out, as things do when we take care of ourselves, that there was a group of ladies there that we would go riding together, and every single one of them was taking care of someone. Wasn't
Wow.
planned. That's what it was. And what I kept hearing, and we would just walk the horses around and cry and talk and compare stories. And what they would say to me was, "No one tells you this. No one
Yeah.
tells you about this." And I thought, well, I said, I'm gonna tell you about this. I am going to make it my pledge, and I'm going to start writing about this because I have to share what I'm learning. Because
Yeah.
you're right, no one tells you about caregiving, what it entails, what it does to you, to your family, and to your heart.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a large number of stories in India about how various people rose to the occasion to care for someone, and sacrifice themselves along the way.
Hmm.
And there seems to be almost a glorification of being a martyr or sacrificial
Hmm.
along the way, as if that were the epitome of caregiving.
It's very interesting that you say that glorification, and I think you're absolutely right. And yes, it's the martyr syndrome. We have to be extraordinarily careful about this, and it's well intended.
Yeah,
There's not a it's absolutely well intended. There's not a negative uh, thrust of this martyr. In other words, people are so well intended, but there's this stigma that we cannot care for ourselves if we care for someone else, that one cancels the other. And it's just not true. And yes, I think it's been passed down generation after generation of we have to suffer through our silence. And again, I call it the silent epidemic. Caregiving is a silent epidemic. Caregivers feel they cannot take care of themselves or speak out about it. And it's the craziest thing to me because it's the most noble thing anyone can do is to give service to others. Why wouldn't we deserve to take care of ourselves? And I think that's the stigma and this victim feeling that we have
yeah,
to hold in to give out.
yeah. As you were speaking, I was thinking about the phrases that you have used about the silent epidemic, about the glorification, about feeling a victim and suffering in the process. And I just feel that a large number of religions glorify suffering, and as if suffering were the way to, or the path, or the rite of passage to something.
Yes, and yes, I agree with you completely. And here's what I'm beginning to understand about suffering. I think it is a necessary part of life. I think that we all suffer, but I think it's how we handle suffering. I heard this wonderful thing recently where, they were talking about a garden and that we constantly have to weed the garden, that to make way for new life. That the garden doesn't, once you weed, you don't stop. You still have to continue to weed the garden. And I think that's what suffering is. I think suffering is something that we experience in life. And I think it's something that is never going to go away. I think no matter what we do for ourselves, it's always there, but it's how we respond to it. And I think religions have used suffering as a means to maybe keep people in line or to help them have some kind of consciousness. And I think suffering is something we must experience in life, but I think it's not a burden. I think it's a challenge. And I think it's how we respond to suffering. And I think caregivers probably, notice and experience more suffering than most people because they're seeing their people they love or they care for suffer. I think they have feelings of grief and pain around other people's suffering and their own suffering. So it does exist, but it doesn't have to own us. It doesn't have to define us. And I think that we have a way of viewing our suffering and experiencing our suffering and seeing the lesson that it can teach us as opposed to it being something that buries us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about, my guru and teacher says that one of the ways of living a dharmic life or a purposeful life is if you can take your suffering and transform it for the greater good, such that should there be another person in your circumstance,
Mm.
they will not necessarily have to go through the same path.
Mm. Oh, I love that. That's power of example for me. In other words, my actions and how I appear to others, the power of example, that when I'm lucky enough to have strong or positive power of example, I can influence others. And I love that suffering, suffering is a gift. And I know that's really difficult to understand and hear. And that's the thing, that's the irony for me, is that caregivers do everything they can to ease the suffering of others, right? we
Yeah.
we we try, right, we try to make it better, we try to ease the suffering of others, we try to turn it into a positive thing, we try to soothe it. So they have these amazing tools to deal with
Yes.
suffering innately for others, but they don't use the same tool sets when dealing with themselves.
Yes. And
It's
that's exactly what we are trying to unpack here and say that let's transform this idea of caregivers and caregiving, and it need not be that meaning. So, so tell us, in addition to that pledge, what was the journey of writing about? What were your challenges? Uh, and the reason I ask you this is because my dream and desire is for many, many more authors from India. Unfortunately, we don't have too many people talking about their caregiving journeys. So we hope to inspire them to write their stories.
Well, I think that that's it's a wonderful thing to work with because I think there's great power in telling your story, and I think there's an extraordinary healing that one has just in journaling or taking notes. You would write about your spiritual. There's so much. There's so many amazing books from authors there about spiritual enlightenment, so it's almost as if that door is open. If caregivers can realize that the value they have in sharing the experiences they go through and the growth they go through and the personal changes they go through as caregivers, and that self-awareness, I mean, I just think there's a wealth of creativity that would just inspire all of us. I remember very specifically that I had to commute from New York to New Jersey in the States. And I would drive down to my parents, and it was a 2 hour drive. And I went through many feelings, and I listened to podcasts, and I talked to people on the phone and whatever. But I remember one day realizing and thinking, I did a lot of thinking, as I do anyway. And I remember thinking that I was absolutely miserable, that I hated my life. I hated what was happening to my parents. I hated how I was feeling. I hated how I was feeling about it. And that I just didn't want to be miserable anymore. And I was thinking to myself, well, I have a choice about how I feel. I can be miserable, or I can have this wonderful journey and look out at the landscape as I'm traveling. It's my choice. I don't know how to get there, but I can either be miserable, or I can have this incredible journey, spend time with my parents, learn about myself. And it was sort of that moment that the seed was planted, that I should do something to help me be less miserable. And I was a songwriter. I grew up singing songs and writing songs. And I said, I should write a song about it. And that didn't quite feel right. And I thought, let me just journal about it. Let me just take a journal. Let me get a binder or a couple pieces of paper and just start writing. And that's what I did. I got a little notebook and I started writing about it. And the relief wasn't instantaneous, but it was there. And I actually found, when I got the words out of my mind and onto the page, I would get a new perspective, because
Mm.
it wasn't actually what I thought I was thinking. I was writing different things and I was gaining insight. And I thought, wow, there's purpose here, and there's something here. And that's how the book started. I was working full time at the time, and I had a BlackBerry, actually. And I realized that I could write when I was commuting on the subway to my job on my phone. So
Mm.
a lot of my writing was done on my cellular phone, because
Really?
I could grab 20, 25 minutes and just write, and it would flow. So I would do that every day, twice a day. And I began blogging. And I thought, okay, I think there's something here. You have nothing to lose. No one will probably even read this. Just throw it up and see if someone can relate, and if your story can help someone, because I'm making lots of mistakes and I'm learning a lot. So let me share it. And that's how everything about Caregiver Warrior began.
That's beautiful. I find that a large number of people would rather talk about their stories of victory, and they talk about their stories of, successes. And, it's harder to talk about your struggles and things that you're not doing right. What would you say about that?
Well, yes, of course. And I grew up um I grew up as a perfectionist. My mom, which is one of the and my mom and I are very much alike, which is why we butted heads so much, is why we didn't get along so well for years. And everything had to be perfect. And it was very important what other people think, how we appeared to the outside world. So to this day I have that. To this day I worry. Um, However, I'm also clean and sober for 35 years, and through my recovery, I've learned the absolute relief of sharing something that a mistake that I've made, or something that upsets me. Well, really, I felt that same way. I think there's such
Yeah.
power in that. So it's where my mind wants me to say I'm the best caregiver I could possibly be. My heart says, reach out to someone else, tell them that you're suffering, tell them that you made
Yeah.
this horrific mistake, and they're going to support you and say, it's not such a bad mistake. I did that 3 times yesterday. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's
Yeah.
such power in the human exchange of soothing each other. We're built to do that for each other. And I think that that's why your mission and my mission is so important, because it's
Mm.
very easy once you get into the flow of that, because we're built to support and be there for each other.
Yeah.
So I was getting relief. I was getting something out of it. by talking to other people and other caregivers and writing about it and having people respond to me and saying, oh my gosh, that really helped me. I was surprised. I mean, I'd be like, really? You really went through that, or that really helped you? But nevertheless, I did get that response back. And once you get used to it, it's wonderful.
That's great because I think if I look back, sometimes I would say that I don't want someone to tell me I'm good enough. I that I must do better than the best, or some crazy thing like that. So
Yeah, it balances you. I think we're all just trying to walk each other home. So I think we want to appear to be perfect and wonderful, but the bottom line of it is we just we want to end our suffering, and we want to share with people, and we want to feel that we're supported and that we can support other people. I mean,
yeah,
so I think it's, yes, I want to feel great about myself, but I actually really want to share my suffering and to share my fears and my anxiety. That's really what's
yeah,
motivating me. Do you know what I mean? I mean, because the fears and anxiety we experience in caring for someone else are extraordinary. And I think by putting your hand up and saying, I'm scared, and having someone say, oh, I know how that feels. I'm scared every day, and you say you are. I think it's very empowering, um, because you know, we feel that way for those we care about. It's so easy for us to see that they're frightened and that they're
yeah,
sad and that we want to care for them. That's why we do what we do. That's why we're stepping in. Why would we be any different? And why we wouldn't let somebody help us through
yeah.
our fear and our anxiety?
I I think it's a very important thing for us to acknowledge that there is some of this, and it's not just a cross that I have to bear. It is something that I can share, and it is something that actually will be better done if I had the ability to share. And I would reckon that your blogs over a period of time gave you the confidence and the material for your book. Is that how?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I must tell everyone who's thinking about writing and doing that, is it is a shock how quickly the material adds up, how quickly how quickly the blogs come, how if you just keep doing it every day and you keep writing, there is an unlimited amount of things to talk about. Just every
Mm,
day something reminds me, or I want to say something. It's just amazing. So yes, the blog started to take off, and I started to get a reaction, and I realized that I wanted to give caregivers something they could either download or they could read, that was more of a concise compilation, which is where the ebook came in. I wanted to, sort of cut to the chase, with some tips and some and things that I've learned that they could glance at, in one place, rather than just the continual stories where I think my stories are valuable, and I have lots of them. I just wanted to sort of compile something that they could, read in one place, and that's sort of where the ebook came. I wanted to give away something that they could, there's some tips and tricks that I've learned, that they could, read and have like at their disposal.
and what a wonderful gift! What a wonderful
Mm.
gift for everyone! And we have just shared the details of the book, and it is available for everyone to access. It's perhaps a distill of your life experiences, and very generous, very kind,
Um,
generous contribution to help
oh,
make the
thank
journeys
you.
of many others easier.
Yes,
And
I feel like these, I came up with, it was very, the number seven is very important to me. So it was my dad loved the number seven. So it was sort of a little gift to him. And I thought, what are the seven most important things that I could list and discuss in an
yeah.
easy to read way for, new caregivers and even caregivers who are experienced and seasoned. And that's where I came up with these wonderful little tips. And it's things that that helped me. These are the things that kept cropping up for me that I kept
Mm.
having to work with for myself, to keep reminding myself and to keep soothing myself with.
So tell us about what is your idea of compassionate, caregiver compassion or compassionate caring?
Well, there's two types on that. It's a very interesting question because I think empathy and compassion are the keys to life in general. Empathy
Mm.
most specifically, but there's compassionate caregiving for those that we care for,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's compassionate care for ourselves. And I
Mm.
think that's where caregivers sometimes get tripped up, that
Mm-hmm.
it's very
Yeah.
easy for them to be compassionate for those they care for and yet beat themselves up horrifically. See, this is going to be a big conversation because I know every single caregiver out there is going to relate to this. So I am my own worst critic. I beat myself up
Yeah.
mercilessly. I mean, to this day, and I work at it all the time. I have very intrusive thoughts about myself daily. I don't
Soul
have them about
sister?
people. Soul sister. So it's I can have lots of compassion for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I can take a fly out of my apartment onto the street so it doesn't die. But when it comes to me, I can say the meanest, most horrific things to myself. So we have compassionate caregiving where we're empathetic and we really look at the person that we care for and try to put ourselves in their shoes and say, are they frightened? Are they in pain? Are they angry? Do they feel guilty? Are they frustrated? So there's a wealth of information there we can gain by looking at those we care for and then responding accordingly. We have to shine
Mm.
that same light on ourselves. Are we angry? Are we mad at ourselves? Are we guilty about being angry? Are we frightened? Are we beating ourselves up about being frightened? Are we pushing our fear down or our anger down? Do we feel guilty? Are we allowing ourselves to feel guilty, or are we pushing ourselves to feel guilty when we shouldn't feel any guilt? So we have to shine the light on both those we care for and ourselves and have empathy and compassion for both of us or all of us. That's a really important point for me.
So, Suzanne, what I feel is sometimes we just have to dig into so much of our reservoir for compassion for others that we run out of that for ourselves, right? So, it's also a question of finding sources of replenishment.
Yeah.
How do you replenish your reservoirs of compassion?
Yes. And I think that's really very important. But I also think, which gets back to your one of your original statements, is that we are hardwired to not go for compassion for ourselves.
Yeah,
We're taught that we're not supposed to have it. So I think that's a hurdle also.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's okay to be compassionate, for someone else, or have compassion for someone else, but we don't have time or energy, or we don't have the right to be compassionate about ourselves. So it's work. You have to work at that. And I think anything that floats your boat, as we say here, anything that helps you be kind to yourself or makes you feel good about yourself so that you can find empathy and compassion. And that can be anything from eating healthy food or making sure you eat just in general or taking a break. I have to force myself to take a break.
yeah.
What is that? Do you know? Now, a caregiver, you're allowed to leave the room. You're allowed to take a break. It doesn't have to be 4 days. It can be 5 minutes. Anything that gets you away from any sort of stress or fear or anxiety or pressure that you have, anything you do that makes you feel good automatically puts you in a better place, and to say to yourself, what's going on for me? You must take your emotional temperature every day, multiple times a day. What am I feeling? What's going on? What am I feeling physically? What am I feeling emotionally? What's that about? And then take a break. You're
What is
allowed.
emotional temperature? Tell us a little more about it. Emotional
This is
temperature.
it's a little phrase that I came up with. So if you had a fever, if your loved one had a fever, you would take their temperature, and you would know that if it's above the norm, you need to do something. So if you
Mm-hmm.
take your emotional temperature, you literally take, and it can be 5 minutes. Go to the bathroom, go outside, and just say, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? Am I angry right now? Is my stomach upset? Do I have butterflies? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? There's halt. There's an halt. HALT. Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Take your emotional temperature and then halt. Am I any of these things? And if so, eat something. Realize you're angry. Think about your anger. Maybe talk to somebody about it. Are you
Mm,
lonely? Pick up the phone, make an email, talk to a caregiver, talk to a friend.
mm,
And if you're tired, rest. If you take your
mm.
emotional temperature and you halt, you're automatically being kinder and more compassionate to yourself. And there's
Yeah,
and there is more of an occasion for you to say, okay, Suzanne, it's okay. It's okay. You're okay. Calm down. Try to do something nice for yourself, because you're going to be a better caregiver in the long run.
yeah,
Who wants to be around somebody who's upset or angry or nasty or irritable? You're a much better caregiver
yeah,
when you're calm and serene and you're not upset. No?
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's beautifully explained, and I think it is so important because in through our academic experience and our professional lives, there isn't so much emphasis on your emotional well-being or even recognizing what is it that you're really feeling. I on so many occasions when I ask someone, so tell me, how are you feeling? I know people get stumped by that. And, okay, what could I feel? Can you tell me what are feelings? And I will pick one. Is something I get to hear a lot because we haven't learned
We
how
haven't
to
learned,
pick
and
our feelings.
we don't pay attention. However, it's there because we do it for other people.
Yes,
It's not that we don't know the process.
yes,
Right? We can look at someone
yes.
and say, right. I mean, I really learned to read my mother, especially as her dementia got worse. I really
Yeah.
learned to read the room.
Absolutely. When we are dealing with children, for example, they don't have vocabulary, they are not telling us. So we are tuning into them.
Yes,
And there's some of us are animal lovers and we know that they don't have a language and we're able to sense into. And
exactly. We
and we
have that
don't necessarily
sensitivity.
need words. Yes.
Yes, it's a feeling. I mean, even just getting into, I mean, you can feel if you're, but I mean, it's helpful to say, is my body tense? Is my stomach upset? Do I feel like I'm going to cry? Do I feel all, am I, it does help to be in touch with the physical ramifications, just like we would, someone that we care for, or children. That's, that's a beautiful analogy, by the way, because so often my mom's dementia, before she passed, she was very childlike. So I looked at her as though she were a child. But you have to look at yourself the same way. If you
Yeah.
just take the time and make it a priority. This is the things we have to prioritize. Make it a priority to check in with how we look and feel. There's a wealth of information there for us, and we can act on that information and
Yeah.
feel better.
And linked to that is an idea that you have perhaps spoken about, which is caregiving blues. So, what are caregiving blues?
Caregiving blues. Caregiving blues are like the worst thing ever, I think. I I you know the most important thing I want to say about caregiver blues, and I sort of soft pedal that because I think it's depression, and anxiety. But by calling it caregiver blues, it makes it normalizes something, that I think we all feel. I think we all get really sad during our
Yeah.
caregiving journey, and I think it
Yeah.
becomes really frightening to us.
Yeah.
I completely agree with the fact that it's absolutely frightening. But I do think we need to normalize the sadness and the grief that we have, um, as caregivers. So I call it the caregiver blues. And I remember there were times where I would just cry, that and I wouldn't even know why I was crying. I mean, as I said, I would commute in the car, and I mean, there would be, and I'm smiling only because I smile at myself sometimes, um, because I would just be like crying, like the tears would be streaming down my face as I was driving, either going to be with my parents, or most especially leaving them. And I began to realize that there was nothing wrong with that. That was just my body and my soul responding to a great sadness that I was experiencing. And I want to tell caregivers out there, and that's why I want to write about it and talk about it, because it's absolutely appropriate and normal to feel great sadness. Now, if it's a great sadness that seems incapacitating, and that is so overwhelming that you need to speak to someone, to speak to a professional, that you can't function, I absolutely want to make sure everyone does that. However, I think there are moments where we have the blues, we have caregiver blues, and that we're just sad, and it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to feel that feeling, and it's okay to honor it, and to sit with it, because you're entitled to feel sad. Caregiving brings great sadness with it, and there's nothing wrong with you. And I think it's very, very important to stress that.
So, Susan, I also think that I think it's important to go back to the original point of go reach out to other caregivers, go reach out to well-wishers, build a support circle, your emotional infrastructure, and perhaps your ways of taking a break so that you can come back energized, charged,
Ab- ab-
and able to face the day.
and rejuvenated. It does recharge you. I mean, I think a lot of times people are afraid to feel their feelings, but we're so afraid to feel our feelings that we're constantly afraid to feel our feelings, when if we felt our feelings for 10 minutes, I,
Yeah.
you feel so much better. And I think that's why the work you do is so wonderful, because there's nothing like reaching out to people who understand what you're going through. There's just nothing like it. And any kind of resources where people can reach out, to people who understand, it's amazing. I woke up, um, I had caregiver burnout one morning so badly. I woke up and I can't, there's no words to describe the physical and emotional state I was in. I was physically shaking. I mean, like
Mhm.
literally like shaking. And I thought I was going to die. I thought that I mean, the thoughts that were racing through my mind, first of all, I was sleep deprived. I didn't really sleep. I was so frightened. I thought my parents were both going to die, that I wasn't going to be able to save them. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I
Mhm.
just thought, I mean, it was the end of the world to me. I was so upset. And I picked the phone up. I picked the phone up because thank God I picked the phone up, and I called someone who was a caregiver and had been through the mill. We had been through so much with her dad.
Yeah.
And she said to me, get out of the house, go home. And I went, what? And she said, go home. She said, your parents are in a place now where you've set up all the medications, you have a ritual with them. Because this was in the beginning when I first started caregiving. Your dad is, your dad can handle everything, set everything up. Make sure that, I'm sure you have food in the house. Did you go shopping? Yes, I have food. Okay. Did you do this? Yes, I did that. Okay. So everything's set up. You were going to leave in a couple hours anyway. Tell your parents you have to get back and leave as quickly as you can. Get out of there.
Mm.
I was appalled. I thought, what do you, well, anyway, I followed the advice. I said to my dad, Dad, I need to get back. Is everything okay? Here are the pills. Here's the food. Are you all right? Oh, yep, I'm good today. Yeah, you can leave a couple hours early. Yes, absolutely. And my mom said to me, oh, yes, honey, go home. I always feel better when you go home early. My friend had said to me on the phone, when you hit the turnpike, you're going to feel better like that. I went, okay. Sure enough, I got in the car, I got on the highway, and do you know, after I cried, in about half an hour, I felt so much better.
Yeah.
I had reached my maximum point. I would have never found that, I would have never known to do that, except someone who had been there was able to give me that extraordinary advice, and it was an
Right.
amazing lesson for me.
So well
So
said. I do think that our community will be formed when people who have been through the journey participate and they form a part of the community. They join the community. So, Caregiver Sathi is a community of people who have been caregivers and those who are. So, you may be in a position to hold someone else's hand, and that's really precious.
it's amazing. And what's so important is to take advantage of that resource. The time and energy you spend being upset and frightened and anxious and confused, the time you spend going over that, you could make a 5-minute phone call or reach out to someone and have a 10-minute conversation or join a group for a half an hour. And the relief you get will last for days.
That's right. That's right. Um,
Instead of,
sorry.
no, it's just instead of, this constant rumination.
Yeah. Yeah. Linked to this, we often hear very often this who has the time? I don't have the time. So, through your writing, I know that you have written a lot about organizing yourself in a manner that you can carve some time for yourself. So, take us through what is it that you would suggest a 101 on organizing yourself as a caregiver?
It's a great question. So, first of all, here's the scenario. You start your caregiving day, and a bruise appears on your father's leg. Obviously, I know about this. I get on the phone immediately. I get on the phone immediately. I call the doctor. I set up an appointment. I change the entire schedule around. I get him in the car. I take him to the doctor's, right? It's
Mm,
amazing how much time I can find, how I can reorganize, how I can move stuff around because
mm,
of a mini medical crisis that happens. That's a
that's
great
right.
tool. I'm the best at it. Okay. So I want you to take those skills and that skill set and do it for yourself.
Mm, nice.
Time is there for you to find. And if you had to do it for someone else, you would find the time. You need to do
Yeah.
it for yourself, period.
Yeah.
So, in case of crisis, when you're in a crisis mode, stop, go in the bathroom, close the door, take your cell phone, make a call, do whatever you have to do. Find that time. The world will not stop, it will continue, and everything will be well. When you do it on a day to day, you build that into your schedule. Surely you do the medications at a certain time or around a certain time, once a week, every day, whatever, for your parents. You lay them out or you do it in 2 weeks at a time, whatever your schedule is. You have that earmarked, you have it benchmarked. You say at 9:15, I'm going to do that. Or generally, I'm going to do that in the morning. So, just like you would do the pills or you would make that phone call for your loved one, you're going to take 10 minutes for yourself. You need to put it in the schedule. I don't care what you call it, but you need to start to learn that every day you can hit the restart button for yourself.
Mm,
Find the time to do it. Make it happen. There's no excuses. I'm sorry. You would find the time for your loved one. You need to find the time for you. I'm really adamant about this because you can schedule time for yourself and the
I think,
universe will answer you.
yeah, I think one of the things that can really help, and as I was listening to you, it almost sounds like, can you decouple yourself from the caregiver role? Can you just say that I'm different from being a caregiver? So
Mhm,
I am a caregiver most of the day, but when am I attending to Bhavna in my case,
mhm, mhm.
right?
Yes, you cannot put your life on hold. The
Yeah,
people you love and care for don't want you to do that. The
yeah,
universe doesn't want you to do that. Your soul doesn't want you to do that. And
yeah,
that's where caregiver burnout can come. I mean, we will all have caregiver burnout. It's impossible to avoid it. But you can sort of push it off a little bit, or you can make sure it doesn't
yeah,
devastate you as badly if you
yeah,
don't put your own life on hold. No
yeah,
one wants you to put your own life on hold, and you mustn't do it because your heart is, your soul will scream.
yeah, yeah. And linked to this, Suzanne, has been another question on my mind, which is around one of the things when we put our lives on hold that gets most impacted because of caregiving is our financial independence and our financial well-being. And what is your take on that? And what is it that caregivers need to be mindful of during the caregiving journey?
This is another great aspect of caregiving. So, just very quickly, when I first started taking care of my parents, um, as most caregivers, I didn't, they were on a budget, so they didn't have enough treats in the refrigerator.
Mm,
Okay. So when I would go grocery shopping for them, I would get little extra things here and there. We have Tasty Cakes in New Jersey, which is a cake that my mom and dad loved. Smiling, they're smiling now with me. And I would make sure they had little extra cakes and things like that. All of a sudden, I would notice, like week after week, that I would have less money. I think, where
yeah.
I don't have, okay, because that's what we do. Maybe they need a new robe, that robe, it doesn't really look so good. And they didn't, I would buy a robe for them. So what caregivers need to understand, and it may be gradual, and you need to have a budget. Just like you have a budget for your parents, if you start to take over the finances, you need a budget so that you're mindful of all the extra little spending you're doing on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, because
Mm,
before you know it, as all caregivers, they're givers, and they want to make sure
yeah,
that anything that their loved ones need, they have, which is a wonderful thought. But before you know it, you're in debt. So
yeah,
you really
yeah,
have to be mindful, just like you're mindful about, if you're angry, you have to be mindful of your pocket. So really start to write the numbers down. Like, start to keep a budget, or make a budget. How much do I have in my own life to take care of my own expenditures and to run my own life? And then how much more expendable income do I have to spend on my parents?
Yeah.
And that's your budget to spend on your parents. And you stick to it as much as you can. Obviously, because we're such big givers, we're going to go over budget occasionally, and that's okay too. But if you know I have 50 extra dollars, that's what you spend, so that when you're in the supermarket, if you've spent the $50, maybe those cakes aren't an immediate concern.
No, I think that's great advice, because I think managing our budget and managing the budget for ourselves, like, sometimes there's a glorification that we spoke about, which is that I did everything in my capacity, so I gave my entire saving, or I did this, or and that can be a trap. So linked to
Mhm.
what we spoke about earlier, which is that a smart way or a modern way of managing yourself is a sustainable way. And financial well being
Mhm.
is critical to sustainability.
Absolutely. And
Um,
we have to think about it this way, is that our parents don't want us to go into debt, or our family members don't want us to go into debt. And we have to understand that just by showing up and doing our best, we are the best caregivers ever. That's the framework we have to stay in. We don't have to be superheroes. We can take our superhero cape off just by
yeah,
showing up and doing our best. That is the most anyone can possibly ever do.
yeah. And you looked after your mom who had to navigate dementia, and it's one of the most challenging conditions to my mind, and all forms of dementia, for the simple reason that you're grappling with, I think, an emotional roller coaster, and sometimes you feel you're not interacting, the person you're interacting with is not. Tell us a little more about caring for someone with dementia, and what is it that caregivers need to be mindful of.
Yes, it's very well, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see someone slip away, you know. Um, I think the breakthrough for me was that um, I worked really hard and began to learn to accept my mom for who she was right here, right now, and that um, the mom that I had before dementia didn't exist anymore. So that I had to accept and appreciate who she was right here and now. And
Mm,
as difficult as that was, it was wonderful, because when you let go of the expectations, you can be in the moment a little bit better. Um, and by just sort of reading the room, or seeing what who she was at that moment, and being soft about that, no matter what it was, and acknowledging that, should she become agitated, or upset, something was going on. She was either in pain or frightened, and that love, just by trying to relax and love her, was more than enough, and more oftentimes than not is exactly what she needed. So that accepting who she was at the moment, and just soothing her and loving her, and getting rid of my expectations, really helped me, and it helped
mm,
her. The
yeah.
softer I was, the more loving, soothing her. Um, it was really miraculous how that helped me.
So, from your writing and our conversation earlier, uh, I suppose there is some other things that I'd like to talk about, and I do think that navigating dementia can be heartbreaking, can be at the same time a spiritual journey, right? It
Hmm.
is about learning to let go. It is about painfully slow goodbyes.
Hmm.
Uh, and it is about learning to just accept,
Hmm.
and therefore spiritual journeys.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes, it's acceptance and surrender are very difficult for me just as a person because I want to control everything. Um, but I have to understand, and I have had to understand with everyone I took care of that it was a journey, and that I was entitled to my feelings, and that I didn't do it perfectly, and it wasn't pretty all the time, and that I was in pain a lot of the time. I was sad, I was angry, I was frustrated, and I think that um, I found surrender as often as I could. It was a tool that I tried to tap into, and acceptance um, as often as I could, but I did it with the help of a higher power. I had to constantly remind myself that I was not in control, that I could show up and do the best I could for myself and for those I cared for in that order, and that there was a meaning to everything, there was a plan to everything, and that if I let the angels or the universe um, guide me, or if I kept my faith that we were all doing the best that we possibly could, and that there was a purpose to everything, as often as I could tap into that, it helped me. It helped me
I
surrender and
like how
helped me
you
to
use the
accept.
expression, I could tap into it, because I like the use of the fact that it's there, but it's not necessarily accessible to us at all points. And we have to make an effort to tap into it. And when we do tap into it, it is a tool, and it is helpful. I
Yes.
know that in your caregiving journey, there was some long distance caregiving, and there was support from family and other members and the dynamics thereof. And it'd be lovely to hear that, because although families are smaller, different people take on responsibilities differently.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there is a play of expectations.
Yes, I always say there's always one that shows up. There's always the prime caregiver. There's one
Yes,
person that shows up for the heavy lifting.
yes.
Um, and I'm really blessed in that, my sister's 14 years younger than I am, and so, and I adore, we walk on water for both of us. We're very, very close. We're very different because she's very easygoing, and I'm like kind of intense control freak. But we get along really beautifully, and she was an extraordinary support for me because I stepped up. I was the one, geographically I was closer, and so that's why I stepped up, because I could get to my parents very quickly, and I was with my parents. So I stepped up, and she was very supportive. I was really blessed in that she, no matter what I did or what decision I did, she supported me. And she was like, "Oh yeah, okay, that's great." you know, but she would listen to me. I could talk to her endlessly. She understood my parents, but it was always, always, whatever you think, you do whatever you think. Yes, that's great. So I was really lucky.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I always say she was braver than I am, because she let go of the reins and let me do everything. And I could never do that because I'm too much of a control freak. But also, I was blessed in that my parents had some amazing friends, and one of them especially, he was just amazing, and I learned to ask for help, thank God, early, and I asked people, I got up, I built a team around my parents. She had next door neighbors, they were great. And then my friend Buddy, who is probably like my brother from another mother. And he really helped me with my parents. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you because he was right there, and he was a source for me. So having this team, like I could call anybody at 2 o'clock in the morning if I needed, and I had an amazing team of people, and that was really important for me. And then I had a team of caregivers
Yeah.
that I could call, people that I knew that I could call, and then I had a therapist. Went to a
Mm.
therapist, and then I when I could, I had my caregiver cowgirls, my girls that I rode horses with. So I really surrounded myself with as many people as I could. I know that that's not always possible. I know that there are sometimes family situations where, God bless them, family members are not as supportive as they can be. And what I want to say to that is, as frustrated and as upset as you can get with them, just remember they're probably cloaked with guilt and they're sort of spewing some of that on you. So take what they say with a grain of salt, because I've had people in my life that did that to me. And try to have empathy for them because they're suffering more than you are, believe it or not. So my advice is to surround yourself with people that make you feel good and get rid of everyone as much as you can that don't make you feel good, and try to understand that you need to surround yourself with a team of loving people, and then lean on them, ask them for help, put your hand up.
There are a couple other ideas that you have written extensively about, and I'd love to talk to you about. One is about helicopter caregiving, and the second is uh, what has dementia given us, or
um,
perhaps the gift of dementia. I don't know.
yes, yes. So so we'll do helicopter first.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have to go, ladies, in about 10 minutes, if that's okay. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't cut that in too fast there.
No, we're good.
Um, okay. So yes, so let's talk about helicopter caregiving first. So my best friend from college, so you know that we were friends for a very long time, who I told everything to, and she told me everything. And we have a lot of history there because we were kids together. She had lupus. And I mean, we always kidded that, you know, she was never going to die, that she was going to be like Cher and cockroaches at the end of the world. They would all be living. My friend Eileen, Cher, and cockroaches, even if the world ended, they would be still standing. Anyway, she had extraordinary things, challenges physically. And so I would call her when I was driving. And one day, for some reason, I just said to her, well, what's it like for you for, you know, when John takes care of you, or the people that help you, help you, what's it like for you with your caregivers? And she was like, oh, they make me so mad. And then she was off and running. And she read me the riot act. She spoke to me about how frustrated and angry she was at her caregivers most of the times, and how frustrated she was. And I was shocked, but I trusted her and I believed her, and it really hit me. So I started looking at myself and I thought, oh my gosh. She said, they hover over me all the time. They're hovering, they're on me, they're making me do things. I need them to just leave me alone sometimes. So I thought to myself, wow, I do that with my parents. I don't give them any space to be like, okay. And my dad, who was the most gentle, kindest guy, he would get a little irritated with me. And he goes, I can do that. I can do that. And I would think, well, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a helicopter caregiver. I'm hovering over them constantly. So it was a big wake up call for me. And what I had to do was I had to sort of kind of watch myself and say, it's almost like a child. He can do that. Let them try to do it first. Or, don't ask them how they're doing 20 times a day. Like, let them breathe a little bit. So that was a great, and again, I believe the universe talks to me, through friends and family and strangers. So that was really wonderful that she gave me that insight. And my parents, once I started backing off a little bit, it was a more relaxed situation. They really appreciated it. So that was a good lesson for me to learn.
Yeah.
And then, as far as what dementia taught me, dementia taught me a lot of things. Um, and almost too many to even, to count, but it taught me to appreciate being present. It taught me to appreciate who I was hanging with or being with right then and now. It taught me to
Mm,
appreciate my mom for who she was, and
mm,
to really be with her and enjoy the magical moments that we had. Because the most devastating thing about dementia is that they can have clarity and then disappear.
yeah.
And my mom, in the beginning, my mom have some clarity, and she'd be like, wagging her finger at me, and and what that made me appreciate was that that moment was really precious, even though she was, not wagging her finger at me, that was my mom at certain points, and that I had her with me there for a minute. Um, so it taught me to really appreciate life, and who people are and who they can be, and milk that moment where she would, right before she died, my mom said to me, oh, I said to her, she said, why am I so sick? And I said, oh, mommy, I don't know, I don't know. I'm just so sorry. And she said, oh, don't you be sorry. She said, you're taking such good care of me. She said, and you've always been like that. You've always been such a good, kind daughter, and I'll have that moment now in my mind for the rest of my life, and um, just the journey that I went on with her, with a disease that robs us of who they are, allows us to see them for who they can be. Um, and it taught me, grace and humility and patience and surrender and acceptance. So it was a very powerful, powerful thing for me.
And a gift to all of us.
Mm, thank you.
And thank you for honoring your parents by being here today. I think it's beautiful. Thank you to them. And
Mm.
thank you for bringing your beautiful presence to us.
Oh, thank you for creating the space, which is what you are doing, which is an extraordinary gift. You're bringing this space to us to be who we are, and that's priceless. So please, to every caregiver, fill that space up. That's my advice to any caregiver who's watching. Fill that space up that you are so generously giving us. Because it's soul saving. So I thank you. I have such gratitude for being with you.
All right. With that, thank you very much. Have a lovely evening and a great weekend.